What is up, SE101 sketching gang? It's ya boy, Darren, and here we are going to be talking about section views. So section views are slicing through an object and looking at it from the inside, and this can sort of indicate interesting features and parts of the object that we haven't seen before. This is really similar to in Revit when you have the section box and you can kind of move it in and out. You can check it out in your textbook starting from page 146. Be sure to watch the lecture and example videos that the professor provides as well. Okay, so brief introduction to section views. There are a few conventions that are important. First of all is the section line. So you always draw the section view aligned with its respective multi-view. So if I have an object on the side, if I'm going to draw the section view, I'm going to draw the sectioning plane on edge. So this is the line that I'm slicing through, and then the arrows indicate the direction that I am looking at it towards. So for example, for this one, I'm looking at it upward. So I slice through it right through the middle, right through these features, and I'm looking at this half of the object. This can become a little bit more complicated later, and there are also some conventions with respect to actually sectioning it. When I'm cutting through it, I indicate the part of matter that I'm actually slicing through with these hatched lines. And one thing that's important about these hatched lines is each of these hatched lines has to be parallel to one another, and they have to be at a slightly different angle than any of the feature lines so that people don't get confused. So your hatched lines will kind of look a little bit like construction lines. The actual sectioning plane, we draw that with something called a phantom line, which is like long, short, short, long, short, short, long, etc. So we'll go through a couple more examples. Check out these in the book, it's super convenient, but in general, like these things like material don't matter that much. We're just going to be looking at different ways to cut through things. So, let's look through this. We have a couple different types of holes, and this is one convention that becomes important over here. So sometimes when I'm sectioning through something, I'm going to change plane in order to cut through the most descriptive, interesting feature here. If I were to take this object and just slice through it, let's see. If I wanted to just slice through it straight with only one cut, this section line would not tell me very much because it does not tell me the diameter of these holes. What's important is the diameter. So what they've done here is they've actually sliced through and kind of kicked it over each way to get through exactly the center of each of these holes. Now where you kick it over does not really matter as long as the section plane is going in the middle of this eventually. And you want to make sure that even though this is technically a change in plane, you don't need to indicate that in the sliced view. So remember, even though your section plane is changing, you can still indicate this as a solid broken out section because it will still be descriptive enough. So let's look at a couple direct examples of this. Okay, here's one thing. We see I have radial symmetry, I have the isometric view, and then I have the side view. So how am I going to draw this thing? Well, I won't go through necessarily all the details, but I'll show you how to section it. When I have something that has radial symmetry, just like that previous example, if I cut right through the middle, that's not really going to tell me very much. I can get what's going on with this fin, but it's not really the best. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut through it a little bit differently. So I see the side view, I can see both of these fins. That's kind of what I want it to look like. I'm going to cut through it, in fact, along each fin, sort of like this. And I'm using a hidden line right now, you use a phantom line. And I'll draw the arrows this way. So arrow direction is something that we actually look at. This is the way that you're looking at it. In this case, you want it to be pointing this direction. So it's like I'm pulling out this chunk of the pie and I'm looking at it this way. So when I actually go through and I draw this thing, it's going to end up looking something like this over here. This middle section, as indicated in this view, is a hole, right? I saw a center line. I still have the center line there. The only physical geometry I'm slicing through is technically this and the fins. But why did I not draw hatched lines on the fins? Well, any kind of thin-ribbed object, you don't want to put any hashed lines in it, and that's just another convention that you have to memorize. It's a little bit annoying, but that's so that we can tell the difference between when something is thick and when something is thin. And there's a good example of something like this in the book. If you go to page 153 in your textbook, that thin ribbed feature is how we differentiate between something like this and something like this. So you want to make sure that you are not hatching any thin rib features on your section views. So let's get into the sketching assignment. Make sure you write your name in your section. So, this first thing is kind of similar to that example that we just looked at, right? If I'm looking at this object, I want to make sure that I'm cutting it through in the most descriptive possible way. So if I were to draw what the section line would look like here, I want to cut through this feature and this feature. So I'll go ahead and draw that just so you guys can see. Long, short, short, long. Arrows facing this way. And then long, short, short, long. Arrows facing this way. And that allows me to see what exactly my cutting plane is. And I'm going to start by drawing the outline of this thing. So, I will take my Dremel, and let's get a bounding box here. The overall height is going to remain unchanged. I'll just roughly grab it. So overall height seems to be this distance, right? From here to the bottom here. What's the overall thickness? Well, I can use my isometric for that, right? I can take this thickness here. And that's the thickness of that bottom part. I'll just mark it. And then I also need the overall thickness of my actual shape. So from the bottom of the cylinder to the top of the cylinder. Here. So I'll draw my bounding box. Alright, what's my next step? Well, I want to mark out where some of these features are. And with respect to my actual section view, actually, wait a second. This should be a little bit longer than I thought. Because in fact, since I'm cutting through this way, I'm going to use this overall distance. So I need to actually double this length over here. That's my bad. So the overall distance needs to be this, and you'll see why in a second. Times 2. Okay, now I can transfer some of these features over. So this middle feature is still in the middle. My center line is going to be in the same location. Long, short, long. I have this whole feature. That dimension that I got earlier for the thickness, I'm going to bring that across to get the thickness of that bottom section. I can complete one visible line, the back. I'll just go ahead and draw the outline of my object so you guys can start to see how this comes together. Should come to here. So with any of these section views, start with the outline, and the outline is usually going to correspond to like the side view. So here it's like we're drawing the profile view of our object. Now, that feature that I marked earlier, the hole, We can mark this and this. Because that's exactly what I'm slicing through. I'm cutting through this is empty space. So what I just drew there is this solid part, the solid part I'm cutting through here, and the solid part I'm cutting through here. Additionally, I have a hole on this side that lines perfectly. And then the other one is just gonna have to mirror that. So you just wanna make sure that the dimension is the same. The location of this one is the same. And you can draw your center lines through that, long, short, long, to show that these are holes. Long, short, long. Am I done? Not quite. I still need to show the hatching. So very gently, just like a construction line, I will just draw parallel lines going all the way through my object. Just to indicate this is anything that I'm actually slicing through. So hatched lines are there to show you anything that is solid. Anywhere you don't see a hatched line is either a hole or it's very thin. So this is an aligned section view, so this is a full section view. If you look at the other ones, this is called a half front section view, so that means half of the view is going to just be the regular front view, and then half of the view is going to be the section. So you would show a cutting plane kind of like this. Where I'm only cutting through half of it. So this would be a typical front view, and this would be a typical section view. Over here, this one is called an offset section view, right? And this is a little bit trickier. You want to just cut through all of the useful features here. So I see this opening, I want to slice right through this. I'll use my red pen to make this easier. Slice right through this one, and then kick it over and slice right through this one. And you're gonna have to tell me which way those arrows face, because we do evaluate that. These can be tricky, especially visualizing them, so I really encourage you to try to do kind of a rough sketch of what you think the isometric of this one and this one look like. If you have any trouble with that, feel free to post in the Discord or send me an email. That's probably going to be the quickest way. So that's all for section views. This should be pretty straightforward. Just imagine yourself cutting through the object, and make sure you read the chapter for the conventions. See you guys next time.